She hadn't gone too far because she couldn't go home. And she didn't really know where to go, but there was a beautiful moon out. And she went up to the next farm, and it happened to be a fella who was able to work out there. He was not the most handsome of fellas, and his wife wasn't the most beautiful of women, and his daughter looked just like him. She wasn't too pretty at all. And they none of them thought anything about it because they was all just happy together, and they loved each other and liked each other. And she, red-headed girl, just decided she'd crawl up in a tree and just wait things out. It was right next to a spring that had a nice smooth top because there was not a ripple in it. While they was on the inside, that youngest girl come out, and she wanted to get them some water. And as she got out there, she saw her reflection in the moonlight, but not her own. She saw the reflection of that girl that was up in the tree, that beautiful red-headed girl. Of course, no color could come through. And that homely girl looked down and saw that reflection, and she said, "Oh my, I didn't realize I was so beautiful. Why, with beauty like this, I ought to get out of here and find myself a real fella. Why, I shouldn't be thinking poorly about myself at all. And in fact, I should just go out and find the most handsome fella I can get and make him my own." And so she decided to leave right then and there. And so she made herself white on to town, walked all night to get in there. She knew the next day that some fellow would see her beauty and fall in love with her. Why, the woman of the house come out too to see what was taking the daughter so long. She looked down in that spring to see where she was, and she said, "Oh my," because she saw the reflection of that girl up in the tree too, and said, "Oh, look at me. Wow, I didn't realize I looked so young and such beauty I am. Why, that old man in there, he doesn't know how good he's got it. He's always ordering me around and telling me what to do. Why, I think I'll just get out of here for a while and make him suffer until he realizes what a beautiful thing he has." And she just decided to go right then and left. After a while, the old man come out to check on what was going on out there. Something strange, sure enough. Why, he went in there and he looked down in that spring and saw that reflection, and he knew it wasn't his. And so he looked up and says, "What are you doing up there, girl?" She says, "Oh, I've had a horrible time. I lost the very one I love, and I don't know if he'll ever recognize me again. I think he's done forgot me." And he looked at her with that beautiful red hair and said, "How could he forget someone like you?" And he says, "Well, people can forget even things they should remember." He says, "Oh, don't worry about it. In fact, I don't know where my girl and my wife went off to, but I figure they'll be back sometime, probably not too long. You come on in here and you can just live here for a while until you can get back to where you belong." She says, "Oh, I was going to get married and get on my own place." And he says, "Well, you sing out here, and if that fella doesn't show off, we'll just get you on back to your daddy wherever he is." And she says, "Oh, I don't know if I want to do that," but she didn't say anything. And so the next day, Jack went on into town to run an errand for his mama, and sure enough, there was that homely girl sitting up on the porch of Mr. Hemphill's steps. And when Jack got up there, when he looked at her, all he could see was what his mind told him. Instead of seeing her, he saw a red-headed, beautiful girl. And he said, "Oh my, there you are. I didn't know what happened to you, and I couldn't even think about you. But just looking at you, I know that we've met before, haven't we?" And she said, "Well, of course we've met before. Don't you remember?" And he said, "Not really. You might have to remind me." And she said, "Well, you met me at my daddy's house, and you were so taken with my beauty that you wanted me to be your wife." Remember, that homely girl didn't know what really happened, so she was just making it up. And Jack didn't remember because he was under a spell. And so he said, yeah, that's it. That's it. Oh, we should get married, and we should get married today. Why, they went down to the church and talked to the preacher, and he said, sure, I'd be glad to have a wedding tonight. You just get on and get your folks together and get them down here, and we'll just make sure everything is good. Why, they got everything planned, and people heard about the news, and people were showing up and walking into town, and everything was a-going good. In fact, whenever the news got back to that homely girl, that her daddy heard about it, he said, oh, really? Somebody wants to marry her? Why, that's the best news I'd heard in a long time. She sure is a nice girl. I know she's not much to look at, but she sure is good on the inside. And I just wish somebody'd really see her for what she is. Of course, that's not what Jack was a-seeing. And that red-headed girl said, oh, I wish they could see what was there too. In fact, that's the very thing that I want for me. I wish someone could see me for who I am and not what it looks like. Why, whenever she got there, they all got to the church, and Jack and that homely girl walked up to the front of it. And as they did, they was a-starting to going through the service. As they were going through the service, the preacher was saying, well, we're all gathered here together, and we're here for Jack and for Julie to get together and get married, and they're going to live their lives together. But before we get that, we want to hear a little bit about how you come together and how you got to know one another, because I just want to make sure that you are doing the right thing. Why, Jack just looked at that homely girl. Of course, all he could see was something else. He couldn't even see her for what she really was, not her looks, and even not how she was on the inside. And she was a nice girl. She was just hoping and wanting someone to like her, because nobody would come to her because of what they seen. And so she was kind of nice about it, and she didn't know what to say. But that red-headed girl at the back of the church knew what to do. Why, she took a little bit of thorn and she dropped it on the floor of that church, and a briar went running down the middle of it, and it come right up next to Jack and started a building up. And she's whispered real quietly, oh, Jack, don't you remember me helping you out with that axe and that little penknife? I'm the one who helped you. And we're the one who made it so my daddy couldn't get us. Don't you remember? And that made Jack remember. And he says, oh, I do remember. But everyone else was going, what is going on? They didn't know what was a-happening. And then she took a little bit of water and she poured it on the floor, and a stream started a-flowing right through the middle of that church, went right down into the middle of it, up the steps and under the altar and out the back, and everybody couldn't believe it. And she says, oh, Jack, don't you remember? I'm the one who helped you drain the well and get away from my daddy. I'm the one who helped you, and you helped me. And Jack says, oh, I'm starting to remember. But by then, with that stream and them brushes, he couldn't even see the girl that was standing on the other side of him. And then she throwed out some little pebbles, and them pebbles started filling up the church with these great big old stones. And Jack had to stumble back, because there between him and that other homely girl, now there was boulders and thorns and a river. And that girl says, oh, Jack, don't you remember the house that we built? That little bitty old pickaxe? And Jack says, oh, I do remember. And I remember I'm supposed to have my first kiss with you. And she says, that's right. And Jack finally looked down to the back of the church, and his eyes were opened, and he seen that red-headed girl for who she really was, and all the help that she had given. And she says, oh, you're the very one for me. And who is this other person? She says, oh, she's nice, and there's going to be a nice fella for her, but Jack, she's not the one for you. And Jack said, That's what Mr. Webster said. And I think that's what my mama said, that I'd know the right girl at the right time at the right place, and you're the one. And Jack made his way through all the people who was trying to figure out what was going. He grabbed hold of that red-headed girl's hand, and they made their way up to his mama's house. And he took her right on into the inside and said, "Now, Mama, this is the girl I was telling you about." And he turned and embraced her, and they had their first kiss. And Jack began to remember. And whenever he began to remember with that kiss, she was broken from all the things that her daddy tried to do to keep her at home and away from everyone else. And they got together, and that's the story of Jack meeting old red-bearded girl and how she became Jack's wife. And that is the end of that. Now, I tell you that story because sometimes things happen that we just completely don't understand. But whenever we come to the Lord, He always has the right time and the right way and the right place for His will to be known. And we need to be patient and listen and learn that we might find ourselves following God and no one else. And that is the end of that.